Seahorse magazine, and I'm starting the second in a series of Transpac position analysis, talking with the winners of the different daily starts. And I'm really fortunate here today to have the team from Hamachi, and Fred Laffitte is here with us, along with David Rogers. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So say hi, guys.
Hi,
even though you can't see them.
Yeah, hello, guys.
But thanks to all of you for tuning in and for following this race. Maybe you're not following it anymore now that your loved ones are already ashore and they're full of Mai Tais. But for those that might have interest in seeing how these guys got to the podium for their respective divisions, and in this case, these guys went straight to the top. They are the overall winners of the race, so their story is a little special. What we have on the screen here is what's happening now and today, but we're going to go back in time. And if you saw the previous analysis that we did with Kerry Deaver in the Cal 40s, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go back in time and sort of start from the beginning and see how the Hamachi team developed their strategy and what they were thinking at the time. We'll zoom in now. I have highlighted their position on the imagery here, and we're going to go just back a little bit more off the start. So, guys, talk to us about the start of the race. You had pretty favorable conditions. It was sunny, westerly, and
It was sunny, 10 to 12 knots, and the key was to try to get a good start. And it usually is the pin end, but it turned out that we started towards the boat and got clear air and were able to get away right away.
Yeah, if I remember, the pin was a little favored and it was a little bit crowded down there.
It was very crowded and lighter breeze and headed.
Right.
So we were able to roll over the top of most of the boats, and we got lucky in the way that the big boats that were above us decided to go on port and left us alone, which is a rare thing.
Cool. Even prior to the start, in your team meeting about what's your strategy? Did you guys have an overall strategy coming into the race? Did you look at the weather, and what was your thinking for the game plan for the race?
For the start, our goal was just to get clean air and make sure that we had a clean rounding of the west end and didn't get caught in any hole behind Catalina.
So the wind was shifted enough to the right, as we can see here, because when we had Kerry Deaver in here in the last show, their breeze was around to the left quite a bit.
Yeah.
And they didn't have quite the same angle to be approaching the first mark of the course here at the west end of Catalina.
Maybe a third of the boats tacked shortly after the start, which seemed to do okay.
Yeah.
We did not. We laid it straight at Catalina, and we narrowly missed the west end, tacked twice, once at the west end and then once to get back on starboard. And those were the only tacks of the whole race.
Right, and the strategy was probably the same with most of the boats. The remnants of the low high pressure was still present for the next couple of days. So pretty much everybody in our fleet knew that you had to go south to some extent. In this case, on the outside of Catalina, it was extremely light on the south side. So a few of the boats decided to go and suffered. But we took one hitch, right?
One hitch.
Hitch, 300 yards, and it was enough to never have a hole. We just got straight to the breeze and dove south only when we got into the breeze.
So what's shown on the in the graphic now is 9 o'clock, so 6 o'clock Hawaii time, 9 o'clock Pacific time. So first night of the race. Were you following your game plan at this stage and in that position?
Cool. Yeah, at this stage we had kind of a waypoint that we wanted to make sure we got into the synoptic breeze that would stay all night and would set us up well to see what is going to happen with what's left of this high and how far south do we need to go. So we followed that game plan and felt we had pretty good speed in that reach.
Right, and we did not put a code zero or anything. We stayed under jib and headsail and staysail throughout the night.
Yeah, we were very disciplined about, we had a heading we wanted and we stuck to it and we didn't try to push it.
Correct, that's well said.
Any larger reaching sails. We just had a J1 and a general staysail.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to ask that. What's your Hetzel combination at this stage?
AP and Genoa Stasel. At
AP,
all-purpose,
all-purpose J1
Yep.
Hetzel. Okay, so you use that for upwind and close reaching.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, you didn't have a jib top.
No, we don't carry a jib top.
Don't
No.
carry a jib top. Okay,
Our next sale was a Code Zero.
right. Okay. Now I was, and so I think given the distances, the scale is over here at this zoom. So 10 miles is that is that dimension there. So looks to me like you're really, except for I guess trouble. So that's a Santa Cruz 50. You're not really close to any of your other J125s. Was that a consideration at all for you guys at this stage of the race? Did you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, going into the race, our goal was the 125s. That's what we cared most about. And there actually is one 125.
Yeah, there's one
that's
to the
very south. The
Oh,
most
right,
southernmost
these guys.
boat is
Yeah,
Rhinerack.
yeah.
Right.
And the other two 125s were just north of us.
Mhm.
But by morning, we could see them. And we were very close with the other two, Snoopy and Velvet Hammer, by
So-
the next morning.
And you were tracking them. I mean, were
Yeah,
you
we
keeping
were-
tabs on where they were?
Very closely watching them.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
to
we
some
can-
extent. I mean, it didn't really. We knew they were north of us, and
Yeah.
we knew Rainrag, let's call it,
Mhm.
were south of us. So we were kind of in between. We were trying to pick a middle track south
Yeah.
to stay into the breeze.
Did that cause
No
an-
extreme.
Did that cause I mean, that's a sort of a tactical decision. Did that cause much deviation from your strategic one, of where you wanted to go?
None
No.
whatsoever. We were
Okay,
going
zero.
exactly
So it
what we
just
wanted to
happened
do.
to be
It
that
just
way.
happened
Yeah.
to be that way.
Oh, yeah, we tracked them out of curiosity, but it did not affect our decisions at this point in the race at
Copy.
all.
All right. Well, and this is so this is 12 July. So this is first night, later at night, and so pretty high speeds too. I mean, to get this far in the first night, you guys are
Yeah.
going pretty fast,
It was fast and lumpy
fast and lumpy. So
And wet. Don't
and
forget wet.
Sure,
and
well,
wet, very wet,
But
lots
that's
of waves.
what Transpac is. The
Yeah.
first
Correct.
couple of days and nights are like that.
On a 125, the whole thing's wet.
Yeah.
It was wet until
Start
the
to
last
finish.
day.
Well, it's a low freeboard carbon fast boat.
Yeah.
It's just what they are. Okay, so Rhinrag still diving south. Now,
Yeah.
timeline on this one is, what does that say? 5:01. So this is 8 o'clock, an hour or two after dawn on the 13th of July, next day. So you guys, pretty fast sprint out of the coast.
Yeah, we never saw the wind speed drop at all.
Right,
That whole
okay.
night.
Cool. And then some guys still kind of diving south. There's the Snoopy right there.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Snoopy had inverted. Yes, they were first north of us, and then they went south.
So maybe that's a Hetzel choice they made,
Correct.
or some
think
other
so.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go a little further in time.
And at this point of the race was pretty interesting. We saw somewhere around here on the grips that there's the lighter breeze for the high up north, and then there was
Right.
also a patch of lighter breeze to the south. And there was just this narrow band that was going to have the best breeze. And we were very focused on making sure that we threaded that needle and lined it up
Like
right.
there's a gate there. Huh?
And talking with Rhinrag last night, they saw it too, but felt that it was too little.
They
to
couldn't
make,
get there.
and they couldn't get far enough north to get to it. And I haven't talked to any of the northern boats about it, but I think they were affected by it as well. And just this middle of the pack seemed to do the best.
Correct,
going
because
through.
that's the day that Velvet Hammer actually came down from the north and crossed our stern
Yeah.
and fell off to leeward
to keep up. Yeah.
to keep up and to position themselves.
Okay. So tactical. It sounds like then based on these maneuvers within the group here, that everybody's making tactical decisions. So they need accurate position data. Part of our storyline is the tracker, as we all know, was on and off, and sometimes
Correct.
giving you erroneous information. How much did you guys rely on this as a tactical tool? Were you looking at it closely? Was it every hour? Was it every 4-hour sked? Or what did you?
Every 12 hours or so, we were getting a
Yeah.
position this early in the race. We were focused in sailing a consistent course without worry too much. We are worrying about the tactics of the other Jet 125 or a boat like Breath Waldo, which was substantially faster at that wind angle.
Right.
So we had to do the best for our boat, but we were not worried about the tracker at this time.
But this was very focused on. We had our waypoints that we wanted for the weather and just tracking the weather.
I see.
Later in the race, we did a lot more.
Oh,
tracking
yes.
the boats.
Now, did tell me about grid files? Were they accurate? Were they pretty well spot on?
At this point in the race, I
Oh,
felt
they
so.
were
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
At this point.
Okay.
It called for that, lighter to the north and lighter to the south, and that the middle was going to be the windiest. And while I don't actually know what wind they saw, the tracker did reflect that the boats in the middle did well, and that the boats to the south struggled, and the boats to the north struggled a bit as well.
Okay, and this is where Brett Waller really jumped out. Now that boat obviously is a little longer, has more stability, more waterline length, and so in these conditions, it's not surprising they're sprinting out.
They were able to carry, I talked to them obviously, they put their code 0 about 6 hours earlier than us and jumped 2 to 3 knots of boat speed. So they got on a plane when we were still under the all-purpose. And that's when they really jumped us. And we were not aware of that because we were not tracking them that close. But by the next morning we were, and we had a long face.
Yeah.
Tell me about your code 0 because there's a lot of elastic definitions of that. Mostly from the PHRF world, the definition of a spinnaker is anything that has a mid-girth of 75%.
Correct.
Or more of the foot length, and so in the so I'll call it PHRF world, but in that world, the sailmakers then develop sails that are at that minimum girth, right, to develop the sail. Now, but with a rating rule system, a VPP system like ORR and ORC, you don't need to have that. You can have something of a different design.
And that's what we got.
Right. Okay.
This sail was designed, is actually 5 years old, but has been used only in Transpac and a pack cup for a day each time.
So Greg Slingstead
did the sail,
Designed for pack cup.
and it's not maxed by any means.
Right, so it's less than that 75.
Oh, yes.
It's very high clued. We unrolled it and we're reminded, oh wow, that's not as small. That's not as large as we thought.
It is not a big, right, which was one of the reasons why we didn't took our blast rate here, because there would have been too thin an overlap.
Right, I see, okay. So, and it's a masthead?
Masthead, correct.
Masthead, full luff length on the masthead.
And fairly flat.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting because those sails are really effective within a sort of 10 or 15 degree wind range, which is
1 day. Less than half a day.
Yeah, maybe 2-3 watches we had it up.
Yeah,
not even 3.
About 3 watches before. Then we went to the A3. To the A3.
Yeah. But I guess the virtue of that though is then you don't have to sail up, take the lift as it's shifting in this range, sail the extra distance to then put the A3 up or whatever the next sail is.
Yeah. It also allowed us to choose to stay in the most breeze. We weren't like you said, we weren't being controlled by the wind shift. We were able to sail that middle angle, and so the 0 was valuable for that.
Well, sorry I don't have the NOR or rating rules memorized for this, but what was your limit on headsails and spinnakers?
We had no limit in numbers. Our limit was weight.
Oh, no. But I thought there's limits. Like you can only have 4 spinnakers. You can only have 4 headsails.
I don't know the limit.
None for Transpac.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So in theory, you could, if you wanted to carry the weight and you had an unlimited budget, you could fill every gap, every niche with the right sail.
But on the 125, as it's so light, we're the only 6-person 125 team. So we were very interested in trying to keep the boat light, and a big way to do that is to be strategic about which sails we bought.
Right. So very strict weight budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only double up we had, and luckily, because was 2.5.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because we blew it up, and the second one,
and we guessed that would be the workhorse, and we were right.
The Brett Waller guys did the same thing. They carried spares. Well, in fact, talking to Wally Cross, he said they actually built their A2s were built heavier for this race with the expectation of the extra.
So that's effectively with the 2.5.
Ours too, that's right, because they're 2.5. They're a little flatter and a slightly heavier class than a normal A2 would be.
And reinforced corners.
And huge reinforcement on the corners.
Right. To take those shock loads.
Correct.
Okay, well, let's see. So this is 13 July 20. So this is actually second night, middle of the second night. And then as we scroll forward, I'm just focusing on what you got. Here you go, getting lifted.
Yeah, and at this point, we can see 2 of the other 125s. It's pretty incredible. I think one of them is so
Snoopy
close
is right
that they're,
Yep.
and Velvet Hammer is so close you can't even make them out on that screen right now.
Wow.
They're right with us, and so we could see them on the horizon, and we could tell when our modes felt good, is they would get a little bit smaller, and then we could also tell at one point Snoopy made big gains, and they were getting larger rapidly, and we realized, we need to change something here.
From what? From the...
That was particularly when it was light and just starting to come aft.
Okay.
We didn't have a light runner on board.
Mm.
That was one of the sails we.
That was a decision to left on the dock. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they did, but
Okay.
So it was really odd to have all three J125 at the same place. When you look at the screen and how widespread the fleet is,
Yes.
Yeah.
all three boats are together, and the fourth boat is slightly to the south and back. And
Okay, well here, let's remind everybody of the scale. That's 20 miles down here in the lower left corner.
Mm.
So
Probably by this point we can't see them.
I was going to say, Velvet Hammer's close for sure. They're within range for you. And then you're chasing down the Japanese
boats, correct.
Yep. Okay, and then Rheinrag's down here. So are you still on your game plan here? Are you still on your route for where you wanted to be?
Yeah, pretty much.
100%.
We were still
Okay.
the waypoints we had talked about in the first moments of the race. We kept reevaluating them and kept liking them, and so.
Okay.
And they were not waypoints that we have to go through it.
Yes.
We will say, if we can, we would like to be here. And it turned out that those waypoints, we ended up crossing them without making the effort to cross them. We ended up there.
So it was a natural fit.
They were natural flow. If you look at our track at the end, you will find a very even track of this race all the way through, except when we started jibing for the finish.
Well, and truth be told, what we're looking at here, gang, is the 4-hour tracker. So this is the one with a 4-hour delay, which means the data that's coming into this in the graphic is every 4 hours.
Which is
so it's
always
smooth
smooth.
things
It's
out.
always
Exactly.
smooth. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not showing many zigzags. But in any case, it's giving us
Our tracker is smooth too. So our own the plot.
Okay.
Yes, and that's why we know we did.
We made a deliberate effort to try to think forward and make sure that we picked the path and kept to it and didn't weave up and down too much.
So here you're starting to get lifted,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure you're thinking decision points. Do we do the classic route? Like these guys went way up to the north before jibing. Most people, as you see, once they start hitting the Great Circle or the Rum Line, they start thinking about jibing just to minimize their distance back down without getting out here to be leveraged.
By this point, the highs had consolidated, and it was a very strong high up to the northwest.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great conditions for 125.
And there's a jibe there, for example.
We finally jibed. This point, we were more closely tracking our competitors. And we had, you can see at the very south of the screen here is Snoopy and Velvet Hammer.
Right.
And we saw them, and also Brett Waldo jibed us around here. And so those are the people at that point in the race we cared about the most.
That's when we switched from being only our strategy to we found ourselves in a position to do okay for the race at this point. And our only competitors were those three boats.
Right. Right.
And we had to start tracking them. And the first jibe of Snoopy and Velvet Hammer gave us a lot of grief because we didn't really want to go there. So it became a tactic, a strategy to try to cover at least partially. We didn't really want to jibe there.
Yeah. Oh, you want to go further?
We wanted to go
We
further.
did not want to jibe, but we did jibe. And
you get nervous about them being down.
And we lost a little bit.
And at the end of the day, we lost 30 miles to Brett Waldo in one night.
Yeah. That was the tensest moment on the boat.
Oh,
the
was,
crew on the
by all
boat
means.
was all really happy and really cheery the whole time. We all got along really well, except for this one moment. That was the tensest moment on the boat. But do we cover and let or?
Well, I'm curious because here's Brett Waldo, at least in this snapshot.
Yeah.
So this is let's see, midday on the 17th of July. So day 4 into the race. It looks like you're jibing before they are.
I believe they had a short hitch in there prior to this, but
'Cause you guys
maybe
do that.
not.
And
They
that's
keep going.
And we
Then
lost a lot of time.
There they,
Yeah, okay, there they jive then.
there
Yeah.
they jive.
They
So-
jive at a much better time than we did.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
No
they're
question.
not maybe as focused tactically as you guys were.
No, and that was a mistake.
We were
Looking back, I would say this was the biggest mistake we made.
So you lost
Was-
that amount of leverage you could have had on those other guys
that is
by
correct.
carrying further out to the right.
So
Yes.
that was a reason. We didn't jibe for no reason, and neither did they. There was
Right.
a patch of substantially strong wind to leeward. We were sailing in 17 to 18 knots, and that patch of wind, at least according to the Gribbs, was 22 to 23. So there's an enormous difference of boat speed on the 125s between those two different wind speeds.
Mhm.
And we were really worried that they were going to get it,
I see.
and we were not.
Okay.
We didn't want to go, but we ended up going to pick up the breeze. And it turns out we had only 3 hours of that breeze, and then it went right back to 17 knots.
Yeah.
Or 18.
But that risk is huge. I mean, in
Mhm.
20 and a 125, you can do anything you want. You can
Yes.
catch every wave you were playing
Yes.
the whole time, and it is drastically different
Right.
than 17.
So what prompted the jibe back then to starboard?
We felt
Bad
we
angle.
weren't going to get it in the bad angle.
Bad
yeah,
angle,
it just
okay.
wasn't worth
Just
it.
plain bad angle.
Right. Right. So okay. Now let's just keep going. There's a jibe across, so now you're crossing the guy's bows. Now you let them get to your right.
At this point in the race, Expedition showed us that the course was fair, meaning that
Now
the
it's like a
left
downwind
and-
leg. And you're
the
just,
left and the
already-
right were going to be completely fair. There was no advantage in the current grips to go either way. And
Mhm.
so the decision was, let's sail it like a downwind race.
Yeah.
And let's jibe on the shifts
Mhm.
and make sure we're going the right way. And so it was a little bit less focused on where they were and the tactics of that, but more just the strategy of being
just
on
play the shifts.
the right angles. Yeah. And we found we could jibe with 3 or 4 on deck, and so we jibed a lot.
Copy.
And
Okay.
I guess I don't know about how the tracker will show that, but I don't really know if there was any gain or loss during those couple of days because
Yeah.
we gained 10 miles, they gained 10 miles. It was a back and forth game during
Mhm.
that part of the race.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, why don't we zoom in now as we get more towards the final approach?
That's the one that's going to be very interesting.
So we'll go. Hamachi remains in the middle. And yeah, it looks like just a bunch of little jibes.
Lots of jibes.
I don't think the
jibes.
tracker captures all of them. There's
Okay.
some that happen within the hour interval that the tracker's updating on. And so lots of little jibes.
Okay, so Rhinrag's back here.
Yeah.
Let's see where everybody else is. Snoopy's there.
Yep.
And then
Velvet
Hammer
will be to the
Hammer's
north.
to the north.
to the
Yeah.
north. There?
Oh,
No, just back.
one. Like
Yeah,
There we go. Okay. So
And
they're
Brett Walden's
potentially
straight ahead.
Hammer's potentially dangerous there.
Extremely dangerous because
Yes.
they have leverage on us on the future
Exactly.
wind shift.
And
That predicted wind shift.
that's 50 mile. There's a 50-mile separation right
Correct.
to scale. So that could, yeah.
And this is and they were doing what Expedition wanted us to do.
Right.
But we struggled to find the right angles to be able to get over there. But
Okay.
Expedition and the Gribbs forecasted there to be a shift that was going to favor if you got leverage north like that.
Right.
And so
So then you jibe
we were
back.
pretty worried about that.
Well, yeah, because now it's actually quite dangerous. So there to your right, here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it almost looks like you got headed, which is interesting. Or no, I'm sorry,
We were on
lifted.
port.
Sorry,
We
you
were
lifted
on
your own
port.
port.
We
Right,
were,
right,
This was horrible because
Yes.
we were getting lifted more
Yes.
than they were,
right.
and we were getting farther and farther away from our waypoint, yet we could not jibe because at some points we may not have crossed their bow more than 10 miles ahead.
Right, right.
So it was a very difficult and very tense tactically because they watched us and they would jibe north the second we did. When they knew we did, they wanted to keep the leverage the whole
Yeah.
way.
And talking to their navigator, they made an intentional point of getting as much leverage as they could on us there and seeing how we responded.
Wow.
It was very interesting. This became a fascinating part of the race.
Well, because now you're in the 200-mile zone, and so your tracker is live or
Correct.
every 15 minutes. So your updates, provided that it's pinging and it works, are at that scale, right?
That's correct.
Correct.
And obviously, everybody knows that our tracker died.
Yeah.
Not by our fault, and I want to
Well, that's another-
reiterate here.
Sure.
Yeah.
The tracker started pinging. I guess the whole race was pinging every 10 seconds, was pinging the satellite, and the battery finally gave up.
Yeah, we didn't know that at the time, but we reached out to race committee before they reached out to us, saying we think the trackers died because I was not able to get our position when I was pulling everyone else's, and that is very obvious in Expedition in the way it charts you because it wants to know where you are at that time.
Right.
And the race committee got back to us and said, "Oh, it's been pinging constantly," and they asked if we could charge it, but they didn't give us the proper cord, and we didn't have the proper cord. So
you're not the only one.
That's okay.
Interesting. And then Hammer actually is up here,
yeah,
even further. So they're really playing that
this
side hard.
This tracker is wrong. We were never in this position with
okay.
Hammer. See, was a confusion of the previous report, because this is like a 4 or 5 year old track for us.
How about that one? Is that a brooch or what is that?
That is the tracker dying. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this caused some confusion, I think, for people at home, and also some frustration for the guys on Hammer, understandably.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think this is probably a good time to just say, hey, look, guys, this isn't a video game. This is not real stuff that is programming and you're on a joystick. This is a fairly sophisticated device that isn't perfect.
No.
Between the satellites, the units themselves, sometimes the software glitches, the transition from the 4-hour delay into the live. Apparently there's some jumps there that are made. And then what I learned from the race committee during this race and doing these analyses and seeing these glitches is that the guys at Yellow Brick were shifting over to a server. I mean, there was a confluence of different things happening.
Well, I mean, it's impressive, too, because all of these are going on one charge as well, right? And they're running continuously for 8, 10, 12 days. Some people were out there, right? And they're all going on one charge. And so it is impressive, the technology. And it's
and I think and then the caveat here is, these things are wonderful, they're remarkable, but they're not necessarily intended to be tactical tools.
No.
Correct.
Right? I mean, they're generalized at best. So we can sit here and do
the 4-hour delay prevents it from being that tactical.
Well, and that's going to be a debate. I'm sure you all will come to the Navigator debrief on Friday morning. There will be an active debate on whether we even have that delay. There are some that say we don't need it, and others that say, oh yeah, you need it because you want to prevent this sort of tactical use of it, because then it forces everybody to have the bandwidth, right, to be able to retrieve this stuff.
Correct.
When I had Carrie Deaver in here doing her analysis of the Cal 40, there's 4 people sailing Cal 40, which means 2 on deck and a watch. She didn't have the luxury of going down there and working with all this data on an hourly basis. It just couldn't be done. So
and neither did we. I mean, I was pulling it, and I also stood a watch.
Yeah,
and
well, exactly.
I spent a lot of my watch down below, but it's taxing to pull this stuff.
Exactly. All right. So final approach. At this stage, you guys had enough, enough of a lefty to be on port, and you're pointing at the mark, so there's no reason to. And then these guys are up here. They maybe went too far.
Well, they tried to keep the leverage as much as they could for one very specific reason, is the Gribbs were calling for a wind of 90.
Shift to the east.
Huge shift and we never saw more than, we were sailing at 45 and 50. I mean, the change, that's one time during the whole race, that whole day, the Gribbs were off by 40 degrees, which is enormous.
Yes, you bet.
Yeah.
It did help us, granted, it did help us. But the velocity was shown properly, which means there was this low patch of wind on the south side of Molokai that we tried to avoid. So we carried a starboard tack much longer, actually, that we wanted to. This is probably that long leg here, which is the tracker did.
Right.
And we ended up fetching our waypoint at Molokai on one shot from way back, from 80 miles out or something, from just one shot.
But because of the wind angle, we had no choice.
We had no choice.
There was no way we were going to
And
drive
that wind
until
never shifted, except towards the end we got a little bit of a riding
coming into Molokai.
But barely enough. But that did hurt Velvet Hammer to some extent.
Yeah, and none of the models showed it. And then the next release of the models came out, and they still didn't show it. It was pretty wild. I'm not sure how localized it was, but
this is unusual. Most approaches at this stage of the race, people are coming in usually North Shore Molokai just to give them some runway to go back the other way, and they're not up against the fence.
Well, this is a little bit deceiving. This photo
we hit Molokai
because we're at this point. Race committee has asked us to give 4-hour updates that they're putting in yellow bricks, so there's some really big jumps for us.
Okay,
and so we actually came down Molokai halfway between Kalapapa and so
exactly,
right where your cursor
exactly where the cursor is.
And we came about 2 miles within shore, and then jibed right there.
Yeah, we called it 2 miles, and you banged it, and we just jibed at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense because this is jumping between fixes because those guys, if they had theirs operational, you'd be more or less on that angle, not that angle,
and we would be further up.
This is midway between 2 of our fixes. We actually were never there because then we jibed back shortly after the northwest point of Molokai.
Right.
Yeah, we never correct.
Okay, interesting. Any other thoughts about this race in general? And I mean, what would you have done to improve? Let's say, I mean, nobody sells a perfect race.
By no means.
No, not perfect.
But having said that, I'm looking over at the corrected times, and I mean, I had been predicting in my shows from the beginning because of the weather pattern that the podium was going to be filled with Division 3 boats, just simply because you guys
the wind
that set up in the breeze.
Yes,
we had started the right day. Yeah, I think that's key to winning this overall. Every year is just you got to be lucky enough to start on the best day and then sail a good race.
Right. Okay. And the top 5, looking at the results again, J125s, Rogers 46. So fast boats with asymmetric spinnakers and bowsprits.
Boats able to plane at fairly low wind speeds. Both the Breathwaldo and us were on a plane at between 17 and 18 knots.
Yeah,
really.
And you could keep the boat on a plane for not hours on end. I'm not going to say that, but you could stay 10 minutes over 15 knots, between 15 and 19 knots, with only 18 to 20 knots of breeze. It's crazy.
And I don't know that bigger boats respond quite as quickly to that lighter breeze of 17, 18. And then we had that condition for like many days.
And that's why the J125 did well.
We weren't planing the whole time, but it was every time you'd come on watch, it was trying to plane, and then you'd go below, and you could hear the guys trying to plane because it is so loud when the boat is on the plane down below.
So what percentage of the race, when you did have the spinnaker up, were you in that mode?
50%?
50 to 60%.
50 to 60%. Okay.
Yeah.
And once one driver or another wasn't doing it, there was a lot of big eyes on the boat. What is going on here? That's it happens. The boat starts to loll around a little bit light, so everybody's looking at the wind speed. Is he doing a good job or not?
Right.
Because we all knew where the threshold was to put the boat on the plane, and the speed difference are 12 to 15. I mean, it's 3 knots. It's radical.
And then once you get on the plane, you can take it to the same angle as you'd sail normally,
identical,
but 3 knots faster.
Right.
And that is game changing.
Another factor out there I hear a lot of is sea state. It wasn't just nice regular Pacific swells. There were some cross swells and some
the whole race.
Yeah,
the whole race.
Yeah.
And there was a couple jibes that were particularly bad. A couple times on port that were just like really challenging to drive.
Yeah.
And we would cycle through a lot because it would be really exhausting.
We had something very special on the boat. Is nobody was proud enough to keep on steering, no matter what. Everybody, and this happened to all of us. If we didn't do a good job, we didn't have to be told. We would get off the helm.
Right.
And I think that is a success. One of the reasons of our success in this race is everybody was humble enough to get off the wheel if they was not doing the job.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, listen, guys, thanks very much for joining us today. Hope our audience appreciates the story, and congratulations on the King Kawakawa trophy. That's you guys have joined a very elite group in the history of this race.
It's surreal.
I got to mention something. Is the 2 owners, Sean Doherty and Jason Andrews are exceptional people. I don't know if people know, but both of them had never seen a sailboat, barely not seen a sailboat until 5 years ago, except putzing around when they were young. That's it. So they really are two dads from Seattle, and they are pretty exceptional people. They were a lot of fun, and it was great.
Well, that's awesome, and maybe an inspiration for some of those out in the audience who want to come do Transpac. You know, work hard and get the right team together.
Yeah.
You know, be lucky. That helps. But a lot of it's, I'm sure, persistence and preparation and all those.
And most of these guys are outstanding sailors by now. I mean, they were before, but now after the race, they are at the top.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you guys. And for our audience, I'm inviting you to tune in once more when we do an analysis video for the 13 July starters, the last wave of starters. I have some material from Stan Honey that might be interesting. Thanks again.